So you've joined our Friday Good Human Sales Secrets webinar. What I do is I'm gonna watch my clock really closely here, and I'm gonna be able to teach, I'm gonna set the clock for 18 minutes to keep us on track because I think it's really important to keep your word when you can on this. I'm going to set 17 just to give myself lots of margin. So I'm going to go for 17 minutes and I will have a little bit of Q&A. I'll invite you to unmute and literally talk in the middle of my presenting and also blow up the chat, get to know one another, put questions in the chat. I usually stay, so I go to the bottom of the hour and I usually stay about 15 more minutes, where if you can stay longer and you have open Q&A, I just give some live consulting, community building, answer questions and further the discussion. If you've literally just scheduled 30 minutes for this, I will end on time and you can jump off and I'll be here again next week. So some of you who are on this call have known me for a long time, and some of you, we're new to getting to know each other. But if you've been in my community for a while, you might know that I, before the pandemic and then during the pandemic on Zoom, I taught a 12 lesson series called The Deep Dive. If you took the deep dive, if you're familiar with that, please, let people know about that in the chat, because that kind of tells you you're in the original group, which is kind of fun for people to identify each other. So if that term is familiar to you, let people know. But it had just so much content, a big workbook. I would take anywhere from 6 to 15 people on Zoom through 12 lessons. We became a little community, and it was all of the sales foundations of how someone becomes a more confident seller. And what I've decided to do, because I haven't repurposed that material for a while, and because it's so extensive and it got such great feedback, and it's been unused and on the shelf a little bit, I thought, why don't I use the Friday webinars to go back through this material? Because I just got rave reviews about it. It really made a difference for people. And plus, a principle of selling is you should repurpose whatever you can when you can. Okay, so I'm also modeling that for you. So I'm going to take you through this material. It's going to take us several months of Fridays because we only have 20 minutes at a time, but I'm highlighting the key lessons and we'll just go through it as it makes sense. And we're going to cover everything from beliefs and mindset through setting a discovery meeting, how to run it, how to qualify well, when to propose, how to ask for referrals, and how to have strong calls to action. So the whole arc of B2B sales is things that we'll cover eventually. Okay, so keep introducing yourself to each other, keep meeting each other, take notes, and be prepared to answer questions as we go through this. So again, we are building relationships here. We are learning business development together. Everything I do, this GH stands for good human. That means we're aspiring to sell with integrity. And we're also always thinking about who we're trying to become. How can we serve at a higher level? What is my present self like? What is my future self like? I'm really going to dive into that some today. So I don't want to make a long time on intros. Just for those of you that don't know me as well, what I want you to see is that I have been like in the trenches salesperson. I've had a cold calling firm. I wrote some sales training material. I turned that into a book. And my most recent thing is I bought a group called the National Business Development Association, through which I'm also offering sales training. And so you'll see that brand pop up periodically as well. Okay, so let's dive into the first lesson. I have become even more convinced in the last couple of years that so much about sales success rests on what happens here and here in us, right? In our head and our heart. And I'm using those things somewhat metaphorically because, to act from the heart, to speak from the heart, it's a metaphor. I don't really mean your organ that's beating and making your blood move around, but I do believe that sometimes as one of our members here mentioned earlier when we were first diving on the call, she was talking about how she was being right about sales and doing things all in exact right way. She was kind of getting in her head about it. And I see that and I do that. So one of the key concepts I want you to get from our call today is I want you to understand how much agency you have. And when I say agency, I mean AGENCY. You have the ability to reframe thoughts that are not helpful to you and turn them into things that are more helpful. And the reason you can do that is because unlike many other animals, around the world and in our universe, we make meaning out of everything that comes into us. We are interpreters about our environment. The problem is that we interpret based on our beliefs and what we expect to see. So, quick jump ahead to some future slides, is that this idea of confirmation bias, if I already think something is true, then, and I'm worried or afraid it's true, then I'm actually going to interpret and make someone else's actions mean that thing that I'm scared about. And the way this shows up in sales, and the reason it's such a big deal, and that I want to talk about meaning making, it sounds kind of philosophical, but it's extremely, extremely practical. Because the sooner that you can, again, metaphorically, kind of rise above watching this conversation that's happening, or reflect back, or literally ask permission to record a sales call and go back and listen to it. The sooner that you practice noticing what you made certain people's comments or lack of comments or response or lack of response, the sooner you recognize what you make things mean, the sooner you realize that there could be an alternative meaning. So the biggest place you see this show up in selling, there's many places, but one of the largest places is when people, and I'm going to stop sharing just for a second to talk about this, because I want you to give me some feedback on this, and feel free to use the chat. One of the ways people make meaning is when they use the term ghosting. I don't like the term ghosting. I think a lot of times we don't know that someone is intentionally avoiding us, but because we're afraid it's true, this concept of confirmation bias, I'm going to confirm so I can be right, even though it's not helpful. I'm going to confirm that you're doing the thing to me that I was afraid would happen. Okay, that's confirmation bias. And so if you are afraid that you're being too pushy, if you are afraid your marketing isn't compelling, if you're afraid no one's going to respond to this campaign, the minute it looks like someone might be ignoring you, you might call that ghosting. And the reason I think that's unhelpful is because it makes the other person wrong, which takes you out of a place of love. It puts you into a place of fear. Okay, it happens subconsciously, but I'm convinced this is true from my own experience, as well as coaching hundreds and hundreds of people over the years and watching my clients do this. And so sometimes we'd rather be right than actually find out what's really happening. And many, 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 many times I've thought that something else was at play. I've made their lack of response mean something to me, only to find out that they were ill, or they took some time off. Or quick example, I got an inbound lead through LinkedIn this week to do some consulting to a company in Houston that I did stuff with several years ago. And they have a pretty short turnaround time. And I was responsive, and I trying to figure out if I can help them and meet the deadline. And it's gonna be a lot of work for me. So I want to check them out on their budget, because it would be something I'd be fitting into a busy life. And so there seemed to be this sense of urgency, and then I didn't hear from him for a full 24 hours when he was the one driving me, saying, I got to get this decided. So I happened to have them in my phone. So I texted as well as responded back in LinkedIn where we had been talking. And it literally said, my life partner was in a car accident yesterday. This was just this week. She's okay, but I'm taking a couple of days off to look after her, and I won't be back with you about this till Monday. Hey, think of all, I mean, it gives me chills to say it, because it's a true story. It just happened this week. And stuff like that happens all the time. And so I saved myself so much heartache by training myself to observe what was happening and frame it in the best light possible. Oh, I know, Adam. I bet something has just come up. Okay. Did I know that was true? No, I don't know what was happening. But because we're meaning makers, we can't help but fill in the blanks. So why not train yourself to fill in the blanks with information that's possibly helpful to your cause, and not making them wrong or making you scared or making you angry? Okay, there's lots of reasons that we don't automatically do that. The negativity bias is another psychology principle, and it tells us that it doesn't matter how many good things happen, we remember the bad ones the most, right? Like that just happens psychologically. So we're actually trained and wired evolutionarily, we're wired for survival. And so we're always worrying about perceived threats. But that is very unhelpful to show up in the way we really want to serve. That, like, the beautiful thing is, conversely, as you improve in confidence in selling, it spills over the other way too, where you realize, I really want to show up differently in my volunteering, or I want to show up different with my kids, or whatever that might look like. Because as my friend Lisa McGuire, who's a branding consultant out of Atlanta, she always likes to say, personal development is professional development. And because I'm married to an academic and I have a lot of smart friends from college that had higher grades than I did in college, because of that circle I'm in, I tend to I used to kind of belittle the whole personal development industry, because I felt like it was like, we're going to walk on rocks. And, Saturday Night Live makes fun of it. And they say, if you think you can, you can. And, all these things. And what's happened is, I learned all the sales steps, which I'm going to teach you on Fridays. Okay. I learned how to write compelling templates. I know how to teach you how to build a sales playbook to follow. I know how many times you have to reach out people to get people to respond. I have all of that knowledge, and I train people in all that knowledge. And the stuff we're starting with, we're talking about meaning making and your responsibility for your own thoughts. I'm telling you, this is the difference maker, because I have had companies work with me for years to train their sales team. And some people pick it up and run with it, and some people never change. And it's largely because of the stuff we're talking about now. It's just fascinating to me. And I confess humbly that I was skeptical and wrong about how much the stuff mattered early, because, again, it was more important to me to be right than it was to be curious. And so I was very diminishing of things I didn't understand, and thought, I'll just teach you my way to sell. And some people changed and some people didn't. And it was because of this stuff. So I've changed my opinion on the way it matters. Any comments or question about that while I pull back up our next thing? You're welcome to comment if you want to comment on Bruce or Marie. You're welcome to. So we're going to talk about now, we've talked about this idea of agency and this idea of meaning making. And so what comes along with that meaning making is that we call ourselves good humans because this is who we aspire to be. It's not that we've perfectly arrived, right? But that we become increasingly aware, because we care about personal development, because we care about professional development. We're becoming increasingly aware that we set false boundaries about what's possible, and that our limits are often self-imposed. And so I have a quick quiz for you to take related to that. I want you, please don't overthink this. Please just list the kinds of things that come to your mind first, because it hopefully will be a demonstration of false boundaries and self-imposed limits. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to fill in the rest of the sentence. Okay. I would like you to type out in the chat and answer this question. I can't sell more because blank. Okay, I'll start this in the chat. I can't sell more. Can't sell more because blank. Any brave volunteers? I can't sell more. Haven't figured out the right way. Thanks, Marie. Haven't nailed down my ideal client. Great. What else? I can't sell more. Why? Lack of time. Thanks, Bruce. Boy, that's real, isn't it? we feel it's real. What else? Can't sell more because why? Anybody else? I have to start small and build up. Right. Oh my gosh, Marie, this one is so true of me. Somehow in my story of my upbringing, I learned that things always happen incrementally. They must build a certain way. And so big leaps don't happen to people like me. Right? It has to happen only incrementally. Capacity. Oh, thank you, Deborah. I love that. So this is tricky, right? Because you sell things. I know what Deborah sells. Deborah sells things that that do require technicians to go out, and it's the direct correlation between staff and what's sold. And yet, I bet that you have been able to grow into what was required if you sold it. Like you're a person that can expand in capacity, but our belief about how true or untrue this is certainly affects our behavior. Anybody else? I can't sell more because fear of failure. Thanks, Joni. Thanks so much. Yeah, just like how I choose to receive a no could mean a lot about me. So I was kind of saying it half jokingly earlier, but I mean, many failures, we actually want those to happen quickly so we learn, so that we keep improving. What is it about our messaging? What is it about our audience? What can I get from that feedback? I probably ought to survey my current clients more. And even after teaching this material and doing this for so long, like you want the feedback, but the feedback's also kind of like my instinct is to make it mean something that I don't have to make it mean, something that's unhelpful. I'm looking at the chat. Thank you so much. This is great. Okay, so I'm just so sad that I'm at the end of time. We will keep picking up on this idea of upper limits. I've been listening. I have a homework assignment for y'all. Let me put this in the chat. If you have enjoyed this and you like this concept of meaning making and thinking about who you want to become and being on a growth path, I just can't say enough about Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Okay, some of you are familiar with one of his most recent books is called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And he is an industrial and organizational psychologist. And I am not kidding when I say that I am following him around the internet. Like I literally just go into YouTube, type Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and I look at what podcast he's been on, because he's made the circuit of personal development podcasts with this book. And what I love about this guy that has helped me a lot is that he teaches, this will be my last point and I'll let you go and then I'll take questions. Dr. Hardy is teaching that most people are acting in the present fueled by their interpretation of who they were yesterday, that this is the default position. And what Dr. Hardy is saying is he's saying this is super unhelpful. And it's actually not how a person really changes. The way a person really changes is that their present self can be and should be informed by actions taken based on how they see themselves tomorrow. And that if you let your future self inform how you act in the present, it's giving me chills. I know I'm getting lots of chills today. It changes your life. And this idea of 2X being less easy than 10X, what he's saying is I can grow 10 times faster instead of 2 times faster. Because when I apply this principle and I think, well, what would my future self do? It causes me to look at things, Bruce, like my schedule. Like, is my current schedule a reflection of my current self? Of course it is for most of us, right? And my past self. But if I were to go look at my schedule for next week and say, is everything that's on this schedule, is it fulfilling where I said I wanted to go? Well, then you're not talking about like 1% habit. You're talking about major wholesale changes because you're saying, no, my future self doesn't run their week like that. My future self does X. So I'm just crazy about this idea. Again, sounds kind of like high level philosophical, but I think it's super practical when the rubber meets the road because it's saying, where am I trying to go? And so seeing that picture of what I want there then informs the decision I make today. So today's follow-up Friday. If you have people that you need to follow up with because you have had conversations, but they have not agreed to work with you yet, you want to do outreach thinking like your future self. You want to say, my future self is brave, is confident. It's totally okay if I'm not right for you. I just want to know one way or the other. And so you take action embodying that future self because you're saying my future self is less scared. And it helps you make decisions about what to do today. Okay, so I'm going to put, in case you jumped in a little bit later, I'm putting the landing page for the September conference. One more time in the chat, sign up to hear about it. You're not committing by following that page, but what you are is opening yourself up to having the possibility of one of the VIP seats, because there's only 35 spots at the reception the night before, and to learn about the early birds. You can pay as little as possible for the actual event if it makes sense for you to come. So please sign up for that. I'm going to stop the recording. I can take questions for a few minutes. If anybody wants to stay, we can talk about, real life situation you have going on, or it could be comment or question about something I've covered so far. And I'll be here again next Friday. And if you have to go, I understand. So thanks for coming.